Live on.
What does this say?
I don't know, but we're about to go live on YouTube here.
You're fine, babe. Relax.
Live on.
Uh-oh. Allow access.
So funny.
What does this say?
I don't know, but we're about to go live on YouTube here.
You're fine, babe.
All right,
Relax.
everybody.
Why is it repeating to us?
Because we can hear this. That's your intro music.
I know. Welcome, everybody. I'm trying to figure out Facebook at the same time. Welcome, everybody, to the Tessa Van Wade Show. We are live today because it is my launch day. Launch. What?
We wore matching t-shirts.
Okay, wait a minute. Ben is having such a hard. Wait, we can't miss this for Facebook too.
Okay,
it's asking me to Ben entertain while we figure out that.
We decided 3 minutes ago to figure out how to post this on Facebook.
Oh, stop. Allow Facebook access. Yes. Bluetooth.
Camera.
Camera.
It won't let you.
Yes, it
Nope,
will.
there
My
you go.
hands are shaking because I'm reaching so far.
We got here to the studio. And
the podcast.
I get out of the truck. I'm like loading out the stuff and putting things together. And Tessa walks in with the exact same color t-shirt I am wearing.
Why the t-shirt thing is bothering you so bad, I do not understand.
Because it's ridiculous.
All right,
go keep it like that. It's kind of silly.
You're so funny about this whole stuff.
We're still working out all the kinks here. Anyway, so Tessa was wearing a very nice looking blue sweatshirt.
I'm going to put the switch. Okay, listen. Ben is having an existential crisis because we're wearing the same color shirt.
There's a reason.
There is?
There's a major reason.
Okay, what's the reason?
My siblings will understand. When I was a young boy, my dad and my stepmother made us take family portraits, and we all had to wear.
This is going really far into the deep.
We all had to wear matching sweaters. Like the 80s, you know, the 80s sweaters that were like multicolored and we were made to wear those sweaters, which I'm sure in the 80s was like, you know, acceptable maybe. But anyway, so
okay, I'm gonna fix this right now because
for the love of God, put something else on. It wouldn't matter if we
you
weren't
guys
on
should have
video.
seen his face. It was like, why are we wearing the same color t-shirt? And I was like, I have no idea. I don't know how we did this. This is when you've been together for way too long and you end up wearing the same thing.
Part of it too, I'm a little bit jealous that you're wearing that blue color because I feel like that blue color would look good on me. I feel like this color is a little bit.
I told you the last time we did this that you need to wear really bright colors because then it'll look good.
I know.
Oh, who we got? Somebody's watching. We got one eye's watching.
We got one eye.
One eye. Well, and last time we went on YouTube, and I'm going to have to take all this off for you, Ben.
No, you don't.
Last time good. Last time we went on YouTube, but we couldn't figure out see, why is it behind?
Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
They probably lag it just in case we do something really inappropriate.
That's true. You are on this. So yeah. So hold on. You got to entertain me because I've got to take this off.
You just keep going. And I can keep talking. You can keep talking too. Just because you can't hear it doesn't mean we're not hearing you.
If a tree falls in the woods, can you hear, or can it still be heard? Or no, what's the thing?
Oh my gosh. Just put your sweatshirt on.
That's funny. All right, everybody.
Oh, that's so much better. Look, you look great.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
I don't really like this YouTube view. I'm liking the other view better.
The Facebook one?
Yeah, so just ignore the YouTube one.
Oh, okay. You mean you don't want to watch it?
No, I mean we'll look for comments, but
yeah,
because of the lag.
Hey, Lisa's on YouTube.
Hi, Lisa.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa.
How did you know that? Oh, Oh, I see
Lisa
it now.
is one of my is one of my favorite people because she reads every book and she loves every book. So I'm super stoked about
She's
that.
one of the like OG
Yeah,
novel fans
Yeah.
of yours.
totally. Like I love her. Um, yeah, so we are here because look what I got you yesterday. I wish we could do it like
You
turn
can.
it around.
You can.
Oh, Ryan's on. Hi, Ryan. Ryan's on Facebook.
Cool. Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
Nice hat.
Nice hat. He's not really actually wearing that hat right now. But
He should always wear that hat.
oh my god.
It's like a pilgrim hat for those of you who can't
I need
see.
to get rid of this thing so I can see what Ryan's
Just
writing
click
us.
on it. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So today is the big day.
Yeah.
Your second novel
Yeah.
launched. It's the second book in a series of 3.
Correct.
I don't know if people know that. Like, do they know that there are 3
Yeah.
books in this
So
series?
it's the second book in the series of 3. The funny thing is like the yeah, it's like I don't know if people know that, but they should. If
Well,
if they've read the first one, it's clearly a cliffhanger to the second one. And I would say there's a little bit of a surprise ending at the second one as well.
Yeah, well, that's your thing, right? But
I don't know.
I think it's important for people to know that there are 3
Okay.
because if you just keep giving them like to be continued,
Yeah.
they're going to start getting really pissed. But
Yes, there's
people
3.
should know that like this story will come to a close in the next book,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, yes, everything will be wrapped up in the third book.
And that's not to say you couldn't do like a prequel and a
Yeah, no, there's other stuff
You know.
that's already in my mind and everything, but it is funny because this third book I'm writing it right now and it's so crazy because the whole time it's been called the Velieri Uprising. Hi, Robbie, the queen of the quill. Oh, that's super sweet of you. Robbie did me a favor the other day and she like finished the second book and she started going through and sending me all of these pictures of people that she thought would be the different characters in them.
Oh, right.
And they were so good. They were so good. Oh, Robbie says not all of us want it to end, Ben.
It's not that. It's not that we want it
Yes.
to end. I just think that for some people, I think they want to know, like, you know, how long am I going to be dragged along?
Yeah.
You know,
My mamacita is drunk. I literally have not eaten or drank anything for a while because I actually did work this morning. And so she is bringing me Starbucks. Uh-oh, you didn't get Ben's.
it's okay.
Oh,
I told her I was going to text her and I didn't
so
until
you
it was too
texted
late.
That's funny.
It's okay. I don't
That's
want
funny.
anything.
So
I'll just
anyway,
suffer.
are such a jerk. So yeah, I agree. I don't want it to end. In fact, so here's a little bit of trivia. I started the book series with the intention that it was actually going to be 5 books.
Really?
I did.
Oh,
I did. But, you know, when you're a new author, and this is why we need as many people as we can to buy it and share it, because when you're a new author, you don't get as much like say in what you do and everything like that.
Right.
So far it's 3. And it's going to be, and what's funny is the Velieri Uprising is the whole series title. And it's funny because I'm in the third book, we really start getting to the uprising.
yeah.
So I'm super stoked about that.
Yeah. Why don't you drink your tea? You know, one thing I'm noticing on this video
Yeah.
is I look a lot balder than I think I am. You know, I wore a hat last time and I think that was a good call. I think I would wear a hat from now on.
Did you bring a hat?
No.
Oh,
It's okay.
babe, you're
hey,
fine.
wait. Today's about you, not me.
Okay.
That's worse.
If you guys haven't listened to our podcast, this is about what you get. There's a lot of about, you know, Ben.
So can we talk about your book?
Yeah. What do you want to talk about, babe?
Well, the thing is, like, myself and the kids and your mom
Yeah.
have known this story for a long time,
Right.
and nobody else has known what happens
Right.
until today. Like,
Yeah.
now people are available, or it's available for people to read. So I'm really excited to hear what people think about the stuff that I really loved about it.
I know. The question is, how quickly can we start getting into that?
I mean, we don't need to give away details of the book, but
Mhm.
we can talk about some of the themes,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I figured that where we would be safe is talking about kind of like the depths of where it came from and everything. So, like kind of where it came from, but I don't want to quite get there yet because,
Okay.
we'll get there. But it is funny because you guys have read the first two.
Yes.
Okay.
Me and
Yeah.
the
But you haven't read
family.
anything in the third.
You've read me little clips of the third, but I
have?
have absolutely no idea what happens in the third.
Okay. Well, it's super exciting because they go into the uprising, and so it starts kind of going a little nutso in the third one because of the uprising. So we've got all the stuff that they worked
Can you
with.
define nutso?
Ben,
Like,
no.
like stuff really starts happening.
Yeah, like stuff really starts happening. Like I'm super dragged in. So people ask me all the time, like when you're writing these books and everything, how does it feel? Like, do you have to plot it out and everything? I've actually found that if I plot it out a little bit too much, then I lose some of the spark for it.
Yeah.
But I do have everything in the third book. I have it all. I know exactly what's going to happen. I just don't know how it's going to play out.
Mm.
And so it kind of guides me.
So
through.
you know how it's going to end,
I do.
and you know who's going to die.
I'm
Or
not
maybe
going
you
to
don't know
say.
who's going to die.
I'm not going to say if anybody dies at all. I can't
Interesting.
say that. Ben.
I'm not saying give anything away. I'm asking you, do you know, like, in the end, you know the ending?
Well, I
Right.
do. I 100% know the ending. I know how we're going to, I know how we're going to get there and what it's going to be, but I don't know it has to kind of like, there's going to be a lot of things that happen that, like, every day I'm surprised by what happens in a way.
That's weird.
It's not weird. You ask any other author and I think it's not weird.
I was going to say, I think it's weird, but I think that probably I've heard a lot of people say that, writers that will say the same thing. Like it's almost like they weren't writing the book.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say that I 100% feel that sometimes. I 100% feel in a way like like it's writing itself. In fact, you've heard me when I come home and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe what this character did today. He always laughs at me when I say that.
That you made up in your head.
Yeah. No, it happened. It like played out in my head.
Yeah.
But it played like a movie. So it's not like I was like, hey, this person's going to do this and this. It's like it all of a sudden leads to it. And then the scene actually kind of like makes it so that I can't describe it. It makes it so like I'll get to a scene and the personality of the character will define what they're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, if I can say that. Robbie's asking, will the third book be longer? Yes. So what you don't realize is that the second book, so we can talk about this a little bit. When you're a new author, every book should be about 80,000 words when you are a new author and trying to get it seen by publishers and things like that. So you have to kind of keep it under wraps.
Like
in
publishers won't even consider.
Yeah. Well, and you
longer than that,
definitely,
right?
yeah. Well, most won't. I mean, if you can get lucky. Yeah. If you can get lucky and get somebody to take 100,000 word count book, then you're good. But most publishers are not going to take you above 80,000. And so mine is the first one. I kept it at 80,000 because I played this game before. I have 10 books written and I never I didn't try all of them to get them out there to publishers and things like that with query letters and everything, but I did try a couple. And definitely what I found was that the 80,000 words for the first, people are looking for that. Publishers are looking for that and agencies are looking for that. So yeah, you kind of have to keep it under a certain amount. The second one is actually, I believe, 95,000 words, 96,000 words.
Which equates to only about 30 more pages.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
so, but what's funny is somebody was like, well, I guess like somebody mentioned in my groups the other day, it was several months ago actually, that they were like, well, Harry Potter, I mean, hers was way longer. And I actually looked it up, and Harry Potter was only 78,000 words for the first one.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It was just thick. Like
yeah,
it
they
was
just
on-
made the paper
printed on
super
paper.
thick. My paper's thinner, all of that kind of stuff, but it is interesting. So yeah, the third one is definitely going to be longer. It has to be. I mean, there's just so many things that I have to
You have to wrap it all up.
I have to wrap everything up and I have to tie it all together. So, and I know how I'm going to do it. It's going to take a little bit longer for sure. So yeah.
So this uprising is it's starting to happen.
The
in
uprising
this
is
book.
starting to happen in the third book. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the uprising had moments. You could see that that in the second, even the first and second book, you could see that things were starting to kind of play out beyond the scope of these main characters. But in the third one, it's taking over for
Yeah.
sure.
What I love about this second book is there's a lot more of the psychological aspect of things, and it feels like a lot of like my favorite stories and my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's kind of like it kind of blows your mind a little bit.
yeah. Well, it kind of blew my mind when I was going through it. I was having so much fun writing it and like kind of digging deep, but at the same time, I was definitely going through my own personal kind of stuff that was really kind of leading into, like, it kind of helped me write some of the scenes in this book and everything. So, let's see. Let's talk about the first one a little bit.
The first book.
Yeah.
It's been out for well over a year.
Yep.
So if
Yep.
you haven't read it and you get upset that we're giving away spoilers, well, you should have bought the book a long time ago.
Ben,
Just saying it
let's
like it is.
insult everybody and then see. No, it's funny because,
You just need to ignore your phone right now.
I know, but it's just,
don't worry about it. It'll
yeah.
clear.
Okay.
In fact, you should have put it
I'm
on
getting-
Do Not Disturb.
I'm getting a bunch of texts and I'm like trying to it's my normal every day and I'm trying to get them gone, but then I press it and then Facebook goes away. So, you know how it is.
All right. So let's talk about your first book.
Okay. Let's talk about the first book. What do you want to say about the first book, Ben?
Well, I remember in your manuscript, or the first time this was like the first version.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about the book was the opening sentence.
Oh, that I ended up getting rid of.
And you had to get rid of it. Because it was
I
like, to
know.
me, it was like the hook.
Yeah. However,
No. You're the new beginning on the first book is great.
okay.
Because you have this, you created a similar hook
Yes.
without saying it.
Correct.
So in the first one, it was, I died once. And to tell you my story, you have to know this fact about me. Something like that. That
Yeah.
wasn't verbatim,
Yeah.
but I died once.
You always loved that.
I did.
I know.
Um,
So the first book, Out of the Shadows, it comes from this woman is attacked, and basically she's completely overwhelmed and attacked in San Francisco, and then somebody comes and saves her.
well, kinda.
What?
She's basically murdered.
Oh, correct. Yeah. She basically dies from her wounds and everything, but she starts to heal pretty quickly.
She dies.
She
at the
dies and then
hospital
comes back.
and then comes back to life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And then she starts to heal really quickly. And the whole rest of the story, the whole rest of the book is about her suddenly finding out that she's in that the world is not what we thought it was, which let's just take that sentence for a second, because to me, that's what I was going through.
Yeah. So this character is just going about her regular life.
Yeah.
Her own sense of reality is just what she perceives.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say that everybody, like a lot of people in this world, and a lot of people here, over the last probably couple of years have felt a little bit about the same that I did. And the reason why this book even came out was the whole idea is that the world was kind of looking like a different place than what I ever expected it to look like.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny because it's hard to talk about this stuff without giving way too much away and everything.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's very similar to the realization that Neo has in the Matrix.
Oh,
When he wakes up in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's just a regular human and she gets attacked and murdered and she comes back to life and finds out that there's this whole hidden society of people, a large amount of people that live for centuries and they keep themselves hidden.
Right.
Hidden in plain view.
Right.
So suddenly she realizes that the world as she knew it isn't at all what's true.
Right.
It's like a cloak of what is real.
Mm-hmm.
And then she starts discovering things about these people. There's a whole system of governments and corporations and things, and also just almost I don't want to say superhuman abilities because this isn't a superhero series. But the idea is that they live so long that they obtain so much knowledge in their long life that they are able to do things that regular humans can't.
Right. Well, the way that I came up with the way that the very first thing that happened that made me think about that is I started kind of thinking like, when you're getting good at something and you see these people that are super obsessed with becoming really good at one thing, and you see them like it just grow and explode in this one thing. Like, I mean, you look at Beethoven, right? And he goes to a piano and he's just like amazing. And so the whole idea was, if we had more time, because a lot of us feel a lot of it came from us turning older.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, are we on the downward spiral now of our lives? Are we on the downward turn of our lives? And instead looking at it and going, okay, what if like time wasn't a factor? Like, what if time at all wasn't a factor and we were able to throw time away? And that meant that we have, like, think about it. If we have less than 100 years, right? Yeah. Less than 100 years that we can like do our thing here. So what we do is we go to school, we get our degrees, we do our job. And then at about 50, we're like all tired. Right. And we're like, but we still have another like 10, 15
Not
years.
just that, we start going, is this it?
Is this it? All of this. And so I started going, okay, so what if I took that equation out? And what I noticed that my jujitsu instructor, like the way he had been in jujitsu for so long, that the way he would fight, it would literally be like, he was barely working.
Yeah, it was like effortless.
Yeah. He would take these grown men down that were super strong and he would effortlessly turn them into pretzels. And I remember watching that and being like, okay, he has spent his whole life so far, like geared towards jujitsu. Now imagine if we had all this time and we could do separate lifetimes geared towards certain things?
Right.
And how good would we get at certain things? How much would we be able to put our hands on certain like our psyche, our bodies? Like, what could we do if we had hundreds of thousands of years to live?
Yeah.
And it is amazing when you do allow yourself to think about that. It is amazing how much the time concept gets in our way.
And also building wealth.
Yeah.
I think that it's pretty obvious in this book, this society of people, the majority of them are very wealthy.
Right.
Because they've been able to amass wealth over centuries.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
And power.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these people are in positions of power.
Right.
It's funny. If like the conspiracy theorist crowd gets a hold of this book,
yeah,
it might become something like they're gonna come up with all these theories about like how much of this is real.
Yeah. It's so funny. Well,
so it's kind of fun to kind of go down that rabbit hole and pretend.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But it is interesting to think about if time was not an option, or time was not a problem, and you had ultimately all the time in the world. I thought about it in all these different aspects. I thought about it in wealth. I thought about it in our physicality. I thought about it in our psyche. And then I thought about it in spirituality, right? Because the older we get, we're supposed to get more mature. We're supposed to kind of learn the ways of the world. When we look at who we were in high school,
we're supposed to grow wiser as we age.
We're supposed to. I hope that many of us do, but it is funny because when you do take the time aspect out of things, then that's when I really got to play. And that's when the books really started to open up for me.
Well, and there's cool fighting scenes because they're all masters at martial arts.
Right.
They're all amazing at like weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
They can't really die. I mean, they can. They are mortal, but it takes a lot.
Yeah, it's not an immortal book. Yeah, they definitely can die.
It's for me as a dude. It's fun to read those action scenes and.
Well, and it is funny because you and I have both been in jujitsu, and so a lot of people have asked me like, did you have fun writing the scenes? How did you know how to write the scenes and everything? And I'm like, well, it is funny because you do, after we both spent 7 years in jujitsu, and you do get to know how the body works and how these fight scenes would possibly go. I mean, every fight scene does end up on the ground within 5-10 seconds. That's like, and that's actually, what we used to talk about in jujitsu is that every fight actually heads to the ground within 5 to 10 seconds, which is why we actually got into jujitsu, because the very first time I ever watched jujitsu, it was so interesting to me how I'd be watching these people, and I was watching, there was a couple of ladies in the actual class, and they were holding their own against these men. Mm-hmm. And the first position that we even saw, remember, we have 2 daughters, and the first position we saw them get out of, we actually learned the technique the very first time we ever watched it, was this technique from a bad position on the ground.
Yeah, like basically rape position.
Right. And so we learned quickly that this is how you get out of that. And it was pretty crazy kind of going through 7 years of jujitsu. And, the only reason we stopped was because of the pandemic and then this book.
Right.
So we really want to get back to it, but it's been a long process and having to deal with everything else that's been going on. So
you have this main character who's a woman.
Yeah.
And she learns that in her past life, basically for lack of a better word, she's reincarnated.
Yeah.
Right?
She figures out pretty quickly through these people that are kind of explaining and showing her what the world really is, she figures out that she was a criminal in this other world.
Right.
And it's not really another world. It is happening. This is what I want people to understand. These books are made. This is not a separate world. This is not anything. This is if it is actually happening right now as we speak today. You could be a hider. I
Yeah,
mean, you
like,
could be a Velieri,
I could
and
be
I could
Velieri.
be,
Yeah, I'm
and I
not-
could be an Epheme.
Yeah.
So
If any of us were a Velieri, it'd be you for sure.
why?
Like, I'm already falling apart. So
Yeah, you are kind of.
I'm definitely just a regular old human.
That's funny.
But this woman, yes, she finds out that she was basically executed for a crime.
Yeah. How much do we want to tell?
Well, this is the old book. This is the first book.
I know.
But she also finds out that she was this great warrior, which I think is cool because it's very today, where you have a leading woman as this like strong.
Yeah, and she kind of
character.
and the underlying theme to the first book is what I feel we as humanity deals with very often, which is not knowing who we are, and because the fear overwhelms us about everything.
Right.
You know, because that is the way we kind of live right now. We live in a lot of fear. We live in a lot of heightened fight or flight mode. And when I was writing the first book, I was kind of I was realizing that I was having a lot of that going on. And then we get into the second book. And what's crazy is throughout the second book I was going through some pretty intense, crazy stuff. And let's go ahead and get into that. You want to get into that?
Sure.
Okay.
It's all you. So
it's funny because there's been many times I've sat in front of the computer and I feel like I should get together with you a little bit more for the Facebook one.
Yeah. That's fine.
So if you've listened to our podcast, you know, this is what it's like. I've been sitting in front of computers at times in my phone going, okay, so how do I talk about this? Like, what do I talk about? Or how do I even begin to tell you my story? And luckily, I believe I can talk about it totally and completely without actually giving away anything in the book. But it's my story underneath kind of some things that led into what the concepts of this book came about and everything. And so it is interesting because I've never been a good sleeper. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been a good sleeper. And what I found is that what kept happening is that every night I would actually kind of wake up in the middle of the night and I would be racked with anxiety. And it got to be worse and worse over the years. It started little to where I kind of just brushed it off. Right. It started very small to where I kind of just brushed it off. And then it got to be more and more and more until I last year, at the beginning of last year, before the book even came out and everything, at the beginning of last year was the beginning, I believe, of like the end of where it was so hard it was so deep and it was so horrible that I was actually like panicking before sleep would even come. Like I was doing everything I could. I was doing everything that people told me to do, journal and this and that and this. And I was like, meditate and pray and all of this kind of stuff. And I was doing all of that. And I was doing as much as I knew to do. And every single time I would lay down, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to get through the night. But it started to get to where I'd wake up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and we're talking like the most severe panic and anxiety that I'd ever had in my life. And I don't even consider myself an anxious person usually.
Interesting. Even though you were
right. Well,
because
during the day I would wake up and I would be fine. I would feel like I would be fine.
Mhm.
And I would be like, oh, I'm okay. I'm, you know, like it must've just been my nighttime sleep. I thought maybe something's waking me up. Maybe my adrenals are off. Maybe all of these things I tried to figure it out and I couldn't. And so then last year, before the book ever came out, when I was writing the second book, I was going through the biggest depths of turmoil I have ever experienced when waking up in the middle of the night. And it got worse over the political and religious and all of that climate that we have been going through for the last 10 years as a society, basically.
Mhm.
It got worse. That wasn't the end all be all, because I knew I kind of always experienced it before, but I experienced it even more as the years would progress. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
I slept through all of it.
Yes, you did. You slept
I'm a
through all
great
of it.
sleeper.
I was like, oh, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would just be racked with fear and I would be racked with anxiety and I didn't know where it came from. Sometimes it would be stuff that would be so like silly, like dumb. Like, why am I even worried about that? Like, why am I having anxiety over something that is not happening? It's not even a thing in my life right now. And then sometimes it would be over what, you know, I had to deal with in business and what I had to deal with, you know, with the writing or what any of that. So it was this weird thing of, I didn't know what would hit me that night. And so I finally got to a point where I got to the very last moment that I could deal with it. And I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, I had my first moment where I didn't want to wake him up. So I actually went out to the lanai. And if you're from Florida or Hawaii, you say lanai, which is
No. We've already talked about this.
Oh, we have.
The Golden Girls said lanai in Florida.
Oh, they don't call it.
Lanai is a Hawaiian word.
Oh, well,
I don't think
they
people
call
from
it?
Florida call it lanai.
I don't know.
I think it's just a patio.
If you're from Florida, can you let me know whether you say lanai or porch
I
or
don't think they
patio?
do. I think that was a Golden Girls thing.
Oh, well, the Golden Girls is a lovely
The extent
show.
of your knowledge of Florida is from Golden Girls.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. I do love the Golden Girls. They were so ahead of their time. So
Anyway, you went out to the patio.
I went out to the lanai and I was by myself and I was literally in this, I was completely wrapped up in anxiety. I was completely like, I was having I was like, what is happening? My body was shaking. I was panicked. And yet I couldn't, if you had asked me what I was panicked about, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. That's the weird thing about it, is if you had asked me what I was panicked about, I'd be like, I don't know. There's just like so many things. And I do have a tendency to be an empathetic soul. And I do know that. And it's one of my biggest strengths. I even talk about this in the
So
book.
were you
It's one of my,
about somebody else?
I remember being very panicked about the world even.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
To
But
take
like-
on the world's problems, that's pretty major.
And then he laughs. And so you wonder why I was like, I don't know, because yeah, I was like, I mean, we all recognize whatever side you're on, whatever political stance you have, whatever religious stance you have, whatever anything you have, we can all recognize that this world and this society has gone through some very intense unraveling. That's a good word for it.
Yeah.
It's a very intense unraveling.
It's been pretty heavy over the last few years, for
It's been
sure.
super heavy. You go with the political climate and the religious climate, and then you add a pandemic onto it and all of this, and
Throwing a couple of wars.
totally. And so, you asked me what it was about, but it was about personal stuff, but it was also about that. It was also like not being able to handle this. And I will say that a huge part of my life is therapy in writing.
Yeah.
And there's a huge part of both Out of the Shadows and Deep Trace. And if you guys are new to what you're watching right now, like if you're watching it later or if you're watching it live, whatever, just so you know, this is launch day and we're talking about the books. And I'm giving an insight into kind of the depths of some of the concepts and how I kind of found myself coming up with some of these concepts. So anyway, back to it. I have realized that I have a horrible sleep pattern. I am like literally not sleeping anymore. Come to the beginning of last year, and my anxiety is just through the roof at night. And the reason I have to make that clear is because some people deal with anxiety during the day. But I had this weird, and so I never thought of it as dealing with anxiety.
I wonder how many people would say that their anxiety is heightened at night.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Because I think there is something to it where like your fears and worries and concerns can actually be heightened
right
while you're sleeping because your brain isn't on guard.
Right.
Like it's unguarded.
Yeah.
So
and unguarded.
You
so hold
blow
on.
things a little bit out of proportion.
So can you imagine where that might have been some kind of lead in into my books when your brain is unguarded?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody's read the books, you can kind of connect and correlate. When your brain is unguarded, you have your worst anxieties and your worst fears. And so that's what kind of led into that. And so, that one night was the worst night I had. I literally felt like, am I going crazy? Like, am I, and yet I didn't know. When people would ask me, I didn't know whether to say like, because, you talk to people and they're like, I've struggled with anxiety for years. I've struggled with depression for years. I've struggled with all these things. The weird part is because I was only having it at night, I didn't know if I could say that. I didn't know if I could actually be like, yeah, I struggle with anxiety, because I didn't during the day, or at least I didn't feel like it. I felt like I was plowing through during the day. I felt like fears, I'll go after them. Like, that's fine, but it was during the night that was really my downfall. And that night was crazy. And so the next day, after this horrible night that I had where I could not sleep and the anxiety was horrible. And I mean, we're talking like I was crying. Ben was asleep in bed. I'm crying. I'm like, I don't want to go back to sleep because then I'm just going to wake up again with more anxiety. And so I started kind of going into the next day. I was like, I'm done. I need to figure this out, and I need to know where it came from. And, anybody who's listened to our podcast before recognizes that I have a deep spirituality. I talk to God constantly. It has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with any of that, but it is a deep seated, like, kind of just love and acknowledgement of the higher power, of the God of my own understanding, And so I was like, okay, God, like, I got to figure this out. Like, I gotta freaking figure this out, because I'm in a horrible place right now. Because number one, when you can't sleep, you also are extremely tired during the day. So basically what happened was, after that, I started kind of going into, okay, what in the world is going on? And I tried to figure out when I first started having anxiety. And at first, what's funny is my brain only went back a few years. And I was like, was it when we moved to Hawaii? Like, no. Was it when this happened? No. Was it, I had already been dealing with that. And then I got to the point where I actually came to the realization that my sleep started to kind of, so I'll just say it. Like, so when I was 17 years old, my parents decided to my parents went through a really poor, really bad breakup. So my parents separated when I was 17. I was going into my senior year in high school, and both my brothers, I have two older brothers, both my brothers were off at college. And so basically I was kind of a lone child at 17 years old, going into my senior year, and my parents separate. And they went from being like people that I totally understood and totally knew, to then I truly believe that divorce kind of leads people, it kind of leads into, hey, Harvey, I'm glad to have you on. Harvey has read both books too. And I love his responses to these books. It's pretty awesome. So my parents, they separate, and that's the first time that I remember very vividly. I started grinding my teeth at night, and my hair started falling out. So my senior year, I actually went, when you met me, because we met our senior year in high school, when you met me, I had hairs like this all the way backwards and forwards on my head, because all my hair had fallen out because of the stress of my parents.
Oh, I just thought that was because you were a swimmer. I
No.
attributed it to your cap.
No, my hair literally, after my parents' divorce, my hair literally started falling out. And it's funny because a lot of people get a divorce, and but my parents, they struggled. They became different people during the divorce, and being the child there within it, and having to deal with it, and having one parent scream at me because I didn't give them the lawyer envelopes, and then this person screaming at me because I allowed them to do this, and it just became a mess. And that's when I remember is the first time that I started grinding my teeth at night, and I started not sleeping as well.
Well, I think my parents are divorced too. Like half the people that are going to be watching this can say the same thing.
Sure.
And everybody has a different story, and everybody deals with stresses differently.
Yeah.
We've already determined that you take on the world's problems.
Well, okay. So
for you, and for probably many other people out there, those kind of things do impact them much in a almost manifest in a physical way.
Well, and I didn't realize
anxiety.
it, but I didn't realize it, And so I think it's funny because you manifest it in this physical way, and you're like, oh, but it'll just go away. Like as soon as this passes, it'll be fine. I'll be fine. My hair will grow back. And you kind of push yourself, especially with my kind of personality. Like I wanted to fix everything for my parents. I wanted to help my parents. I wanted to be there with them, and everything. But as a 17-year-old, I now look back, because we have a 17-year-old. And I now look back and I'm like, what in the world? That is so much pressure and so much like stress on a 17-year-old that it just was too much for me. And I didn't realize that, you know what I mean? So then what's funny is I started going, okay, once I started thinking about it and actually going through the process of my parents' divorce, and I know that sounds silly because it was so long ago, but the truth of the matter is I think a lot of times we can even have trauma back from our childhood that we don't work through, and it comes out later on in life.
Well, not only that, we may not even know we have it.
Correct.
We may not be able to identify.
I think most of us can't identify because we don't take the time and we don't really get into it. So these fictional books are kind of my way of like leading into that. But then I knew that this was part of it, but I just kind of started going through so much stuff came up of like, I had so much shame, like in a way. Wow. We're just going to really put it out there today on Facebook Live. And YouTube Live. I had so much shame when I thought about, my dad and my mom through that time of like, what's weird is suddenly I realized that I actually had a lot of shame that I couldn't help them in certain situations. And it wasn't until my older self last year talked to my younger self from 17 and went, it was not your job to get them out of those situations. It was not your job to be the peacemaker at 17 years old. And I went, oh, yeah, I would never expect my 17-year-old to be the peacemaker in divorce ever. Like that would be the last thing
But
ever.
that is how our 17-year-old is also.
I know. Well, because she gets a lot of
we better be careful.
So going on further, I suddenly realized after I kind of walked through the time of my divorce, because I was hell bent on not having sleep troubles anymore. I was hell bent on not dealing with this anxiety anymore. So I walked through the thing with my parents' divorce, and then I was like, okay, I got to keep going because I feel like there's more. I feel like there's more to it, right? And so, the next time that I remember, and you actually woke me up during this time, but so my aunt during my senior year died of brain cancer. And that was just an addition to everything that was going on with my parents already. And I was really close to them and I really loved them. And my second aunt, which is her sister, I still take care of to this day and still love deeply. And as we kind of like go through this divorce with my parents, with people who were upstanding citizens in their church and all of this, and suddenly your whole clan that you had around you all your life is gone and everything. And so Ben's disappearing at the moment. So anyway, so it was funny because I basically was like, what do I do? How do I look at the rest of my life? Because I was kind of trying to get through this. And then fast forward a couple of years, and my father coming home from lunch at his work, he actually was killed in a car accident. I remember the day that it happened, and it's crazy because it happened on a Thursday. It happened on November 4th of 2004. And the funny thing was I was pregnant and I guess it's not funny, haha, but I was pregnant and I hadn't told him. And so basically it was a really sad moment because I realized that I hadn't told him. I was going to tell him at Thanksgiving. But we didn't make it quite to Thanksgiving. And you and I had randomly, like, we were supposed to both go out with groups of friends, and we randomly had both decided to stay in. And I get a call from my mom, and she says that he didn't make it through a car accident. And so that was another big thing. And pretty soon after that, I started to remember that pretty soon after that, you started waking me up in the middle of the night telling me that I was grinding my teeth.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it was crazy because I had this person telling me I was grinding my teeth, and I would wake up with my jaw just completely sore. It was awful. I would wake up with just horrible jaw pain and things like that. So I started walking through that whole process. And what's crazy is when I look back on it, I was pregnant, and pretty soon after that, I had my first child. So I never talked to anybody about it. I just kind of moved through the whole process. I was like, I'm good. Like, I feel okay. Like, I would have my moments of in and out of pain over losing my dad to a car accident. And I had all of that. But overall, I was like, okay, I'm okay. I have this baby. Hey, Jessica, good to see you. I had this baby that I had to take care of. Okay. So here's where it really started. I have a baby. I have my first child. And I have it after a really rough it was a great pregnancy, but it was a rough beginning because of my dad. And I kid you not, when I first started laying there after my daughter was born, I would be panicked that something would happen and that I was was panicked every day. And now I know this naturally happens for women after they have babies. I get that. But there was a whole added thing of losing my dad and all of this right before my baby was born. And then all of a sudden, and it got to a point where one day I woke you up and I said, I am horrible. I am struggling. I cannot sleep because I'm waking up with this severe anxiety. I would wake up sweating. I would wake up just this horrible, like everything that you could imagine. I was just thinking it and it was going through my head and it was just an awful thing. So really that's kind of another part where you and I talked about it and prayed about it and we moved on, and it kind of dissipated after a while and stuff like that. And so all this to say, then more things happen, right? We go through some more things, and then we get to last year, and suddenly I realized that I literally have been not sleeping well for 16 longer years, like intensely, like, and what happened was it always creeps in. This is the thing that everybody knows when it's about anxiety or it's about anything. It creeps in so that you don't know that it's actually happening. You don't know that it's actually going on until it's so huge you can't get out of it, right?
I'm going to agree with you, but I haven't experienced that. But
right.
Yes.
Yeah, but you experienced it with me. And so you kind of watch it happen. It's one of those things. If you're new here, we are talking about today's the launch day of Deep Trace. And I'm just giving a little insight into how I came up with the concepts that are in both the first book of the series, which is Out of the Shadows, and the second book of the series, which is Deep Trace. So I realized after kind of walking through last year, I was just at this place where I was like, I'm literally never sleeping. I'm literally in a horrible place sleeping wise. And I don't know how to dig myself out of this. So anyway, as I start walking through these things that I never actually dealt with, I start walking through these things. And it's so funny because I started recognizing things that I didn't actually realize I was going to get in, like I didn't actually realize was ever a problem. Where's your brain right now?
I'm just listening.
Oh, so it's one of those things where I didn't actually realize, like, this is the thing that's keeping me awake. And this is the thing that's making it so that I have total anxiety and everything like that. So what's funny is going through this process, I was writing the second book. I'd already written the first one, which is, like I said, a whole underlying theme of like the fear of who we are and why we can't figure out who we are and everything. But then going through the second one, I was actually going through this at the time. So a lot of the scenes that I wrote in the second book and a lot of the concepts in the second book come from recognizing that my unconscious mind had literally gotten the best of me, and was not allowing me to sleep anymore.
Yeah. And do you remember we were reading, you're going to have to remind me his name, not Adyashanti, the other guy,
Eckhart Tolle.
Mm-hmm. We were reading one of his books, and he talks about the unconscious versus the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how the unconscious is like the deep, deep stuff that we don't even know.
Yeah.
The things that trigger us that we don't know why.
Yeah.
The things that have, like you just went into with detail, the things that have caused us to become the things that cause us to build our shells,
right,
around our calluses,
right,
we build our armor.
Yeah.
And most of the time we don't even know why or how,
right,
or what happened, but it still controls how we act on a daily basis. And if we can figure out how to tap into our unconscious space
Mhm.
and figure out what those things are, we can be released of those things,
Mhm.
right?
Correct.
And that's you go into detail about that
Mhm.
in this book.
Yeah. I use it in a fictional way because I was dealing with all of that and trying to figure out, like, where does this all come from? Why am I not able to sleep? Why do I have such severe anxiety? I think it's funny too, looking at it, like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I've struggled with anxiety for years. I would have told you, no, not at all. Like I don't struggle with anxiety, but
No, I think for you, and it, this has a lot to do with how we grew up, and, just, you're okay. Just
yeah, you're
move
okay.
on.
It's just, you'll be good.
Um,
You'll be fine.
But a lot of it has to do with the fact that I remember you always just said, well, I have insomnia.
Yeah.
Like you just diagnosed yourself with insomnia.
Mhm.
Whereas for me, like my thing is, well, I'm just kind of an angry person. I just have a short fuse. Well, no, there's a reason I have a short fuse.
Yeah.
And there's a reason you have insomnia.
Yeah.
And we've both been working on those things.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
But what I think is so cool about this book and going through what you've gone through, you've taken your experience with this, like, trauma and fear and anxiety, and you've put it into this really cool concept where, like, these people, they live for millennia.
Mhm.
And if you can't shoot somebody dead,
Mhm.
and you can't beat each other up until one person wins because you heal too fast, what's the best way to beat them?
Right.
And that's to beat them with their mind.
Right.
And they've figured out a way, like in the first one, you talk about tracing.
Right.
And when your mind is unguarded, people can get in. Rather than beating you physically, they can beat you mentally.
Right.
And that's where this whole really cool concept comes in, where they actually fight each other on these different, like, mental planes.
So what's interesting about the tracing, that actually came from like a concept, that concept came from what we were talking about like the political arena and like and social media and like the religious and all of that crazy stuff that was happening so much over the last like 10 years. And the reason why tracing happened was because I was recognizing that like, number one, I believe that the individuality and people being their unique selves is one of the most beautiful things in the whole entire world. And yet we as a society are constantly trying to make ourselves the same. And if you are not the same, then you are the outcast,
Right.
or you are the other side. And unfortunately, the fact is no relationships can be figured out that way. You cannot have a relationship with society. You cannot have a relationship with your spouse, with your friends, with your business partners. You cannot have a relationship out there with believing that if they disagree with you, they are suddenly the enemy. And so the fact is that tracing came from a place of, when people have these unconscious places and these subconscious places, the tracing came from these. We can be manipulated within these places.
We can absolutely be manipulated by using our own fears against us.
Right.
And
that's the first
to act in ways that we normally wouldn't act.
Right.
But if you instill enough fear and passion in somebody, then suddenly they will act on those things.
And that is the gist of Out of the Shadows. That's the underlying tone of Out of the Shadows, is that we recognize how deeply embedded we are in our fear. And in this world, we are walking in a state of fear. And yet the truth of the matter is, where does that fear come from, and why do we have it? And how do we even have relationships with people, or how do we even fix society when we can't actually have the deep and the deep discussions, the deep talks, right?
Yeah. And this is where normally I would say you can't fix society.
Yes, you would.
I mean, we can, I think what you're doing you're an artist, you're an author, and you created this world. And I think that's what literature does. I think that's what music does, and other forms of art. You can change the world a little bit for the better. You can put good things out there.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an uphill battle
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that's why people are going to respond to this story, and that's why they already have. And what's interesting is we have people from all walks of life.
Right.
We have people who are very strong churchgoers. We have
Mhm.
people who are very strong atheists. We have people who are like somewhere even further than that, and like they have their own interesting
Yeah.
lifestyles and
Yeah.
beliefs, and they all kind of respond in the same way because we're all human and we all deal with this exact same thing because
Right.
we all have the same type of brain.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that because I think of us, humans are mammals. Not that long ago, we were living as tribes
Mhm.
in the jungle trying to survive. And we're tribal. We are tribe type animals. We're pack animals.
Right.
So there's a safety in fitting in.
Well, it's
with
funny
the
that you
people
bring
around
that up because that is actually, we had that entire conversation because that was my idea. That was my idea in the second one, I believe, that we talked about the fact that we are such a tribal people. And so the problem with that is that even to this day, our protective mode and our thing is that we can only look like this in this group, right? We can't. And if we have anybody that looks different, we're all red in this group. And if we have a blue come in, we're, or if we have a black come in, or if we have, anything like that, if we have a different color or we have a different person come into our study, it's not okay. And that to me is the problem. And we've lost the ability to talk to people, and we've wrapped ourselves and cloaked ourselves in so much fear over the years. And we've done ourselves a disservice to not deal with some old traumas and things like that. That's literally coloring our eyes of how we see every person in relationships and situation.
Well, because we're tribal, if somebody doesn't look, act, or do the same thing we do, it's almost like a threat.
Right.
It's like it's foreign.
Yeah.
And that's why even to this day you have, we are American, you and I. And there's this there's the different nations, and there are some nations that just distrust other nations. Right now, there are some states that distrust other states. And in the same towns, there are people who distrust other groups. And it's this natural tendency to group ourselves into the familiar. And it comes down to survival. Back in the day, if you fit in, you survive because you're part of the group.
Right.
The problem with that is that very nature is what leads to distrust.
Right.
And it's the very reason we go to war. No matter how advanced we get, we're constantly warring with each other. And in this book, you have essentially, it's not two races of people. They're not races.
No, in fact, I wanted that to be completely clear. Everybody is human.
Yeah. It's
That's
almost
the
like
thing about these books. So everybody is human. We now have a completely different divide than what we're used to. And so I wanted to get rid of all of that. I didn't want to have any of that in the books, because what I wanted to represent the divide of humanity in a completely different way, that that's why I created the powers and the prophets within this book.
But regardless of
and the reds,
regardless of the race thing, like these people come from all over the world. It's almost like a blood type.
They're everywhere.
It's almost like a blood type. So, but what's interesting is regardless of that, you still have this hate.
Right.
Because the humans, the regular standard living humans like you and I,
The
hunted
Ephemes.
these. Yeah, they're called the Ephemes in your book. They hunted
Mhm.
these people
Yeah.
millennia ago because they were a threat.
Right.
And now it's kind of swinging the other way, that now there's groups in the Velieri that absolutely hate the Ephemes. And it's all because they're just different.
Right.
And I think there's a big theme there too, that it's almost like we need to learn how to live together
Yeah.
type thing
Mhm.
before anybody else gets hurt.
Well, you know me, like I wish that I could like have everybody love on everybody and like not. And so it's yeah, like the truth of the matter is, I remember somebody was like, this Out of the Shadows is pretty violent. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Humanity is violent.
Humanity is tough and life is tough. And the fact is that a lot of times for me, violence in books, and you get less violent in the second book and all that stuff, but it's not, to me, a lot of times the violence in the books, it's a representation of kind of how we've all treated each other.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely not glorifying the violence. Nope. You're portraying a very realistic situation. If this were true, this is what would happen.
But this is true. The funny thing is I had a thought the whole time. So, you've got the Ephemes world, and you've got the Velieri world, and you've got these Velieri that the whole thing is, it comes down to, and I could give you guys, if you all had questions, you can always email me, but I could give you a whole backstory into the whole process of the Ephemes and the whole process of the Velieri. But everybody, if you're listening, if you're coming in, we are actually doing live on YouTube as well. I'm not sure how the sound quality is for Facebook, but we are doing a live on YouTube as well. And we're talking about, today is my launch day for the second book for Deep Trace. And we are going into just some like deeper concepts that are there. And I talked a little bit about what kind of brought me there, and that I was dealing with some pretty severe anxiety for a while, until I kind of realized what was going on there. So anyway, the whole idea behind these books is that you've got these two sides. You've got the mythos, which is the time of Methuselah, the people who live a very long time. And you've got the ephemerals, which means that they do not live for they live a normal human, what do we have, less than 100 years.
Well, yeah, I think, every ancient culture has stories about people that lived very long time.
Yeah.
In the Bible, it talks about people that lived,
yeah,
hundreds and hundreds of years.
Uh-huh.
There's in a lot of different cultures, you have these, same thing with like giants and stuff.
Yeah.
So they talk about that's where your kind of concept came from. That like, okay, what if that were true?
Right. What if that were true? What if we did have a whole bit of people that could live for a really long time, and then a whole bunch of people that couldn't live for a really long time? And the first thing that came to me was, that would never be able to happen.
Hate each other.
They would hate each other. There would be so much jealousy. They would just fight. They would just, yeah. And so what happened was, in the Methos and Ephemes war, way back when, the Ephemes, because they couldn't live as long, they began to hunt the Methos. And then when they had a big war, after the big war, the government, the prophets, and the powers decided that the Methos would go into hiding, and that's when they became the Velieri. And so it's really interesting, because you've got this whole war that happened long time ago, but now we're jumping forward, and this is just the Out of the Shadows and Deep Trace is simply about the one group of this one woman who is dealing with, suddenly coming up with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So she's suddenly dealing with the fact that she's learning about the Methos and Epheme war and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So where is that coming from?
I think somebody's doing some work next door.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a loud noise coming over what we're doing, but hopefully you guys can't hear it. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot to go into. A lot of the concepts are super like, it's all about what we're dealing with as a society now and what we're dealing with today. So, but today is launch day, and it's so funny because I just wanted to put something out there to kind of like, being an author is a really interesting thing, because you write these books and you write with intention, and then you put it out there and you're like, okay, now what? You put it out there and you're like, okay, here we go. This is like, you can either love it or you can either hate it, or, however it goes. And so, having launch day, it's just a day. And I had to learn that last week, or I should say last year was a lot more intense, I think, for me, because I was dealing with all of this other stuff and this anxiety I was going through and everything. And then this year I wanted it to be completely different, like just enjoying the process of putting that second book out. And the response has been super amazing. I've been stoked about it because I guess in a way it's nice to have people recognize what you did, what you put into the book, and how hard it is, or how much you worked at it,
Yeah. And I was going to just make a comment that, I think some of the best stories and the most inspiring stories come from people's pain. And it's almost like you don't necessarily want to be thankful for it, but at the same time, I am kind of thankful that you dealt with
that I had
stuff.
years of not being able to sleep.
Not just that like you've turned that into something that we can all enjoy.
Yeah. No, it is true.
Rather than just, dwelling on it and complaining about it, you turn it into a book series.
Yeah.
And that we can all enjoy, and not just enjoy in a, an entertainment aspect, but a lot of the response we get is people that are like, you have no idea how much this story helped me.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's just a fictional story.
Yeah, it's a fictional story, but it is
but it
amazing because
touches
I am
something
getting a
on
lot
it.
of response of that. And it is funny because it is a fictional story, but I think that my hope for these books has always been that whatever it is that I was processing within myself, that I would be able to kind of help others process within themselves too. But yet I'm also a firm believer. Let's not, we've been going super deep into all of the the anxiety that I was going through and the heaviness of all of these, but let's just, go back to, I also just really love an amazing fiction story.
Right.
So for me, like, I've walked away from movies before, and my intention has always been I would write books so that I could see them in movies someday.
Yeah, but I think the greatest stories, the greatest movies, some of my favorite movies, some of my favorite books, they're really, really good, but it's also because they're very, very
poignant,
meaningful.
Yeah.
And you can write plenty of books.
Yeah.
But
the connection with you as a reader is important.
Yeah,
the connection with you as a watcher. And it is funny because it is one of those things where I've always mentioned that Last of the Mohicans, so that I watched when I was 13 years old. I walked away from Last of the Mohicans more changed in my life than any other book or any other movie I've ever watched. Yeah. And to this day, it's still my absolute favorite movie that I watch constantly. And the reason being is because it had such a deep impact on who I am and what I wanted to do and everything. And so I do believe that fiction can take us to a place where it takes us away from reality. And I think that the problem is that when we make things too, like, I don't know about anybody else, but the fact that people are so into these really deep, dark, like almost every movie that I see out there going to these film festivals and everything, it's so like heavy and so dark and
there's a genre for everybody.
No, there is. But for me, for my personal being, it brings me into what's reality. Like it brings me
Yeah.
into like, oh, I'm already dealing with this. Like we're already all dealing with this. So like, like, do we have to watch people not getting along? Because guess what? Nobody's, it's like nobody's getting along right now. Like nobody can hear each other speak. Like this is happening. I don't want this, So for me, fiction has always been a way to bring people out of that, to bring people out of reality, right?
Mhm.
And bring them deeper into like kind of a different way to look at life.
It's nice to escape.
You want to escape. But I also think we learn more when we can escape, because reality often puts chains around the way we think.
Well, the last thing you want to do when you get home is turn on a movie about fitness. And the last thing I want to do when I get home is watch somebody build something.
Oh, totally. I do not want to. Yes.
So it's
You're right.
nice to escape a little bit.
You're right. Well, everybody, I wanted to make sure that everybody has a chance to just know that for an author, it's so important and so kind of everybody to support us in these ways. You can get Out of the Shadows and Deep Trace on Amazon right now. And it's super, it's just one of those things where I'm hoping that it has a good response and that we are able to get it out there a little bit more, and just make sure that it has its time. But honestly, just being supportive of an author is super amazing. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I've been getting lots of responses about this book and I'm so grateful for them. Like I appreciate them so much. Any review that you can do on the book is awesome. And any time you can purchase the book, I mean, obviously it's awesome. And then sharing also.
I think the biggest gift you can give if you love these stories is to review it on Amazon, but also to share it with, mention it to
social media or
people.
Just friends and family. And
that's unfortunately that's kind of how it is now. In order to get things out there is to get people sharing it with their friends.
Yeah.
So that's the best thing. That's the best gift that you can give Tessa.
Well,
sure.
And by the way, I went into that whole spiel about like not being able to sleep and having anxiety and all of that stuff. And I said, like, I kind of went through this whole process of going through the back end of things that I had gone through. And what ended up happening, and, just to kind of leave it in a roundabout way, is I feel like completely freed of that. That has been, it's crazy because I am actually like working with somebody right now to kind of come up with a little seminar actually, because this is what I do, like beyond being a personal trainer, beyond having a gym, you get into the deeper part of people's souls when you do that. And I deal with a lot of people that have dealt with anxiety and all of that kind of stuff. Hey, Vicky says aloha. So, and so it's one of those things where I go through a whole process and get out of, I've realized that a lot of us live in our fight or flight mode. So we've learned and we've processed and we haven't processed, and we live in a lot of resistance and fight or flight mode. And so it's been an interesting process trying to get out of that, or being able to get out of that. But the books have been a huge part of that. And I am in the middle of writing the third. So I'm super stoked about that. And like, hopefully I can make it good.
You will.
I will.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys want to, please buy my book and share it. And I would love that. That would be awesome. And if you have any more questions, please reach out and contact us. We also have a podcast that we have been putting together we have 23 episodes, 22 episodes, and we've been doing it for a while now and we love it. And we're going to have some more people on the podcast to talk about a bunch of different things. So if you love our podcast, please subscribe. And again, we are so grateful for all of you guys that have been supporting me and supporting us in this process. And I hope that you guys love Deep Trace as much as I do.
Totally. Congratulations.
Thanks,
on the book
babe.
release.
Thank you. Launch day. Woohoo. So we will see you guys later. Have a great day today. And again, I hope that you guys, oh, thanks, John. Says good book. I hope that you guys have just such an experience with the craziness that goes on in this second book.
For sure.
All right. Thanks
Thanks,
guys. We'll talk to you later.